The award-winning American Airlines Advantage program rewards more than travel. It takes your whole life to new heights. Earn miles when you fly, as well as with thousands of your favorite brands. And then redeem those miles for flights, upgrades, and experiences worldwide. Advantage members also enjoy earlier boarding and free high-speed Wi-Fi in flight. Join for free and start earning towards your next adventure at aa.com/Spotify.
Fox News is streaming live on Fox One. When it matters most, you want the truth from the voices you trust. Fox News goes beyond the headlines, bringing you the stories you won't hear anywhere else. Live coverage, sharp analysis, real perspective. At home or on the go, stay connected when it counts. Stream Fox News on Fox One. Download today.
Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the casual weekend pantaloons to our starchy midweek three-piece suit. I'm Kenny.
And I'm Alex. How are you, Kenny?
I'm all right. Alex, I've got a question for you, given that the heat is ongoing and never ending. Beards in the summer. Are beards in the summer a curse, or are they a glorious form of insulation?
I don't know. I mean, long hair is definitely a curse. It's like wearing a woolly hat the entire time. But I have a feeling that beards, because they probably help perspiration, which is what cools the skin.
Yeah.
They're probably a cooling thing. I don't know if anyone is listening and is somehow in the right scientific discipline for this.
Beardiology.
Please let us know.
Let us know if you get wasps stuck in
God,
them as well.
You knocked me out with that one. I mean, it probably wasn't very difficult, seeing as this is my 6th podcast in 7 days.
You're a gritty boy.
I put out a really absolutely fascinating conversation about the film, Christopher Nolan's film, The Odyssey, with all of the experts together, including Linda Marek, the film expert from season 1.
Cool.
And it manages to be almost as long as the film. No, but it's genuinely interesting, because what we did is we basically split it into our review of the film as, Joe Blog cinema goers, basically, taking off the classics hat, and how did the film work as a self-standing thing. And then we went into how does it compare as an actual telling of the Odyssey, which is a slightly different judgment, What did they leave out? What did they put in? What did they get right? What did they get wrong? And it was kind of marvelous, because we disagreed with each other on everything, but in such an incredibly collaborative and civil way, we changed each other's mind on some things, not on others. We never formed sort of factions. It was just exactly how conversations should be. It was like the antidote to social media. The 360 character posts that just invite you to be strident about everything and absolutely certain that your opinion is the one that's right and everyone else's is wrong. So I found it really therapeutic.
It's something that we discussed in the studio last week, was that it was a bit odd that they'd left the gods out of the Odyssey, which is, even you and I agreed that was kind of a core omission. Did you and the fellow experts even agree that that was problematic, or were there multiple views?
Some of them, and it's interesting, the film critic and my sister, the archaeologist, did not agree. They thought Nolan was making a film about war and speaking to young men about the horrors of war and how it changes the country and how it changes people, whether you win or lose. And their view was that for that to work, there has to be agency. Someone else can't be responsible for what you're doing. But the other 3 thought that the gods were a significant missing element. If you remove divine will from the story, if you remove this force working against Odysseus, preventing him from getting home, then basically it becomes a story about a bloke who refuses to ask for directions.
I love that take.
Which is which is perhaps the oldest story of all.
Any women listening to this podcast, you will know exactly what Alex is getting at there.
Any
No.
men listening to this podcast will also know.
Now, what have we got to do today? First of all, some housekeeping, I suppose. A huge thank you yet again to all those listeners who've already bought tickets for our fantastic live event, which is happening in London's Leicester Square this Thursday. All right, mere days to go. It's a three-way, just to remind you, between Quiet Riot, the people behind the Lincoln Project, which is one of the most effective organizations battling Trump, and our besties at Byline Times. We'll be discussing authoritarianism and, in particular, what Britain can learn from America about this curse. We will, of course, leave the ticket link in the show notes, and if you're a Ko-Fi backer who's coming along, do drop us a message to quietriotpod@gmail.com once you've bought your ticket, and we'll let you know which pub we'll be in after the show for a meet and greet. We've booked it already and sent some emails out, so I won't be on the stage because there's already plenty of talent going to be up there, but I will be in the pub after, because of course I will. So get signed up at ko-fi.com/quietriotpod before the 30th of July. We are looking forward to meeting you over a glass of something very, very cool indeed.
In fact, he'll be in the pub probably during the show. Okay.
Anybody wants to join me, drop me an email to quietriotpod@gmail.com.
What are we going to talk about today, Kenzo? I think I feel duty-bound to cover the new Prime Minister's first week in power. I should say Andrew Burnham is now Prime Minister, for any listeners who have been on a hike without reception or a yoga retreat for a couple of hours.
All right, if we're doing Burnham for one, for topic two, I thought we could look to India, where protesters in cockroach masks have forced the education minister out of office. It's quite amazing. And we should also ask, I suppose, if there are any lessons there for us back in Blighty.
We honestly did not mean that to be a very cruel segue. And for our mini third topic, I think, we have to chortle, scream in terror at the latest bit of text shenanigans, which involves an AI model in testing, escaping from a laboratory, breaking into a rival company's system, and generally making everyone go, WT, the actual F is going on here.
AI had a better math than Odysseus, didn't it?
Yeah, hold on, did I put one too many letters in there? Yes, it should be W, the actual F. No?
Or WT, actually. We'll get AI to do it and re-edit it afterwards, shall we?
This reminds me of a sort of teenage character in Frasier who keeps making these mistakes by going, and for your FYI. Anyway.
Right, let's do it.
Quiet Riot.
Has it really been a week since Andy Burnham got the big job? Actually, no, it hasn't.
No.
But he's already been a very busy boy. In 5 days, Burnham announced VAT cuts on electricity, restored the £2 bus fare cap, announced a cut on business rates for pubs and music venues, launched a 340 million attack on rough sleeping, paused the early release of thousands of prisoners, and opened a northern branch of Downing Street in Manchester as if it were a pizza express.
Careful.
He also visited Scotland, attended the Commonwealth Games, and found time to rate pub snacks with his new Chancellor.
Real pork scratching.
This looks good.
Wonder if
Bit old school, but we're quite old school, aren't we, me and you? When did you last buy a pack of pork scratches in a pub?
2 weeks ago.
Well, yeah.
Number one for me.
I'll go two then, just
All
to
right.
spice it up. Now, talking about old school, I mean, come on.
Scampi fries.
Come on. You could tell when somebody had had a pack of scampi fries, couldn't you?
For
Remember.
at least a couple of hours.
At least a couple of hours. This may be ending well. McCoy's would be up there for me, but I wouldn't necessarily go salt and vinegar McCoy's first.
I go out my way to get these salt and vinegar crisps.
Do you?
Yeah.
I'm imagining a crisp butty with these. Do people eat crisp butties in Harlow, do you think? Is it a northern thing?
I think they would.
I think they would. No.
Yeah.
I probably thought they would.
Yeah.
I do have a thing for a pickled onion monster munch. Yeah, I know.
I think on the 7th day he rested. Thatcher had monetarism, Blair had the third way, Burnhamism may turn out to be buses, devolution, and a firm view on the quality of a Scotch egg. It has been energetic, politically sharp, and almost entirely free of catastrophe. But is this genuinely the beginning of a new model for Britain, or simply the old government with better optics and a seasoned London to Manchester ticket?
I mean, nicely summed. First things first, then, I guess, Alex. Do you think that Burnham's had a good opening week?
I mean, in one way, he has had a sort of miraculous opening week because for 2 years now, we've been talking about the government's inability to get a grip of the media grid, so to get a grip of the news story. And he managed to get the grip of the news story really every single day this week, and even last Friday with his very first speech. So that sort of makes me a little bit more annoyed about the previous administration, because it's proof of concept. It proves that you can do it by being on the front foot, by putting out an eye-catching announcement early in the morning. You know, you control the narrative. So what happened was energy VAT came on Monday, I think.
Yeah.
Bus fares came on Tuesday, business rates on Wednesday, National Economic Council and Number 10 North came on Friday. A coherent story, right? Empathy, cost of living, your priorities, growth, rebalancing. And what happens when you do that is that even when everyone is criticizing, and there's been plenty of criticism about these policies, but the point is everyone is talking about the thing you want them to talk about.
Agenda setting, that's right.
So even if it forces the opposition, you know, even if it forces Nigel Farage to go on TV and say, oh, £45 a year, who cares about that? That makes him look out of touch. Even if it forces...
He's returning the service for a change.
Exactly. Even if it forces the Conservatives to go on telly and say they don't have a way to pay for it, they're still talking about your announcement, and they sound as if they are against a cap on bus fares.
Yeah.
That's the general impression being created. So yes, I think from that point of view, he has had a splendid week, and long may it continue.
Quiet, Riot.
Honey, what are you listening to?
Mom!
Your teen might not share everything with you, but teens share everything with each other. And certain everyday behaviors, like sharing food, drinks, or kisses, could mean sharing bacteria that can cause meningococcal disease, known as meningitis. Although meningitis is uncommon, about 1 in 10 who develop it will die. Ask your teen's doctor about missing meningitis vaccinations. Learn more at meningitis.com. Vaccination may not protect all recipients. Sponsored by GSK.
Quiet, Riot.
On that basis, then, do you think that he's broken decisively with Starmer right at the beginning of his premiership?
Not politically. We don't know enough about policy. We don't know enough about his long-term vision. He says he will spell out a 10-year plan at the end of this year.
Yeah.
And so, no, we don't know enough at the moment to make that determination, but he has certainly broken decisively with the Starmer administration in terms of style. I mean, some of his Instagram little posts have been delightful. They're, genuinely funny and engaging and humble. And it just makes you think, well, why couldn't the last 2 years, why couldn't they find those sorts of talented people that could put that together for them? Even if a man at the top does not have the same affinity and ability to sort of be everyman and relatable, which not everyone does. But there were plenty of people in that cabinet who could do that. They just needed a team to decide that that's the way to go and put it together. So what do you think? I mean, what's your impression?
Presentation doesn't replace policy, but poor presentation can strangle it in the court. There's no doubt about it. They've taken the fundamentals of clear political communication when you're in that role properly seriously. So they've had a very clear grid. They've maintained control of the agenda, and they're taking the social side seriously. Now, let's see if they manage to keep that rhythm going, because doing the TikTok and Insta and the general social stuff on a daily basis is fine for a couple of weeks. But after that, it becomes increasingly difficult. It's hard to come up with the ideas, and it's hard to build in the time to do it as well. But first 5 days, initial impressions are there are people in there who understand the job, are putting the hours in quite clearly. For the first few days, I think, they get a big tick box for that. It's a huge improvement over what we've had, not just in the Starmer government, but I think it's a huge improvement over what we've had in recent years. We'll touch on this later in the show when we talk about what's been going on in India, but we talk about the importance of social media in the modern political arena, but very seldom do we see social media being used in a way that makes us sit back and go, actually, this probably is improving communications. This probably is helping whoever's putting the messages out. So, look, early optimism. And like I say, it's difficult to maintain this sort of pace, but I'm very hopeful. The cost of living announcements were a fairly big deal. But do you think they were genuinely meaningful, or is there a big element of him tossing out some crowd-pleasing trinkets at the beginning of his premiership?
Okay, I'll give you two answers. The first one is that something that is a trinket to you might be meaningful to me and vice versa.
Fair call.
Because we don't live in the same circumstances. And this was really brought sharply into focus when a listener emailed me to say that the cap on bus fares means a 600 quid saving a year for his family.
Boom.
You know, that's not a trinket to that person. It might be meaningless to me because I live in London and anyway buses are capped at £2. But it's not meaningless to that man. It means a few extra pairs of shoes for their kids. It means a hell of a lot of tins of beans. And so whether something is a trinket or meaningful is a very subjective thing. The second thing to say is, at what point do the trinkets add up to something meaningful?
Yeah.
At what point does, the cap on bus fares and the VAT and the reduction of business rates, at what point do those things add up to something that actually does give you a little bit of breathing space? You do hit that point where the little things add up. I believe it's actually the motto of a very well-known supermarket, isn't it?
If you're listening, marketing department of very well-known supermarket, we do sponsored rates.
We're not going to say it until you pay us. Let me ask you then, the trip to number 10 North, the gathering of all the mayors there, does that seem to you like a serious transfer of power, or is it a sort of branch office? I mean, I joked about it in the intro, but does it actually make a big difference? First of all, does it wrong foot the press, who suddenly don't get to be outside this building up on a scaffold shouting?
I think if you're a freelance journalist, if there's any freelance journalists left in the north of England, it's happy days for you, because small teams won't be able to cover London and Manchester without sort of big travel bills having to be signed off by managing editors and such like. So there's an element of that. I wanted to make a difference, but moving meetings north is it's not the same thing as moving actual power north, because you and I would agree that Whitehall is really very, very capable of centralising Britain from a different postcode. That's absolutely what Whitehall's good at. The real test will be not whether or not the Manchester office functions as an office. The test will be whether mayors receive the control they need over the things that Burnham's made his own: the transport, the housing, the skills, the investment, the revenue generation, and including, I think this is the key, including the ability to make decisions out of that office that London is uncomfortable with or actually dislikes. So if there is tension there at some point, I will view that as probably being a sign of success. Now, whether Team Burnham will view it that way remains to be seen. Number 10 in the north is a powerful symbol, but if the power doesn't actually leave SW1, it'll become levelling up with nicer brickwork. It really will. What's your view on it?
I don't know. I mean, it's too early to tell. And it will be too early to tell in 6 months' time, and it will be too early to tell in 2 years' time, to be honest, because these tectonic plates take time to shift. But I like the look of it. I like the optics of it. I think they say something, and they reveal someone who is trying to say something.
Yeah.
Which is a positive thing. And I really like the fact that on his second day, he was launching the bus fare cap from Bath.
Yeah.
He wasn't in London. He wasn't up north either. He was in a different region going, when I say we need to decentralize, I don't mean I'm going to take everything and move it 200 miles north, and that'll be that. Because that's not what devolution is about. So it certainly declares that he's serious about it. Whether he will be successful, I don't know. And whether the plan holds water, I don't know, because I haven't seen the plan, quite frankly.
No.
But at this point, I don't doubt his intent or his commitment to this.
Quiet. Riot.
Kenny, what do you make of the promise to end rough sleeping?
I thought that was the strongest moral choice of his opening week, because it tells us quite a lot about the sort of stuff that Burnham wants government to be for. And for most of us listening, ending rough sleeping is about ending the inconvenience of walking past people in the streets of our cities. But for a whole bunch of people, it's much more serious than that. You know, it's based on a really very sensible principle that preventing homelessness is more humane, as well as being cheaper, than having to pay for crisis healthcare, for policing, and for emergency accommodation. I want this one to work for lots of reasons, but just at the back of my mind, I'm very aware that keeping people permanently housed requires a lot more than homes. You know, it requires stuff like mental health care. It requires things like addiction services, functioning councils. So Burnham has chosen something that superficially at least looks like a solvable injustice, and he's made a big step in week one. I just have to see how far down the road this goes before social services are kicking down the doors at number 10 and number 11. But he gets a huge round of applause for pushing the boat in the right direction in week one, as far as I'm concerned on that one.
Look, I agree with you that it is only step one. I don't know if you know my background, but I spent a year actually homeless, and a little of that was sleeping rough. So I have kind of intimate knowledge of it, even though it was for a relatively short period, because I think part of what grates on homeless people, part of what really wears you out, is not knowing when that period of homelessness will end. So looking at it retrospectively already puts you in a much different and better position. But what seemed to me to be the case was that the very first step is and has to be for the temporary accommodation to be better than sleeping in the street. Because when I was sleeping rough, that wasn't always the case. You know, some of those massive multiple occupancy wards smelt of chlorine and felt incredibly unsafe. You didn't know next to whom you were sleeping. And in a way, it felt safer on several nights to go and find a quiet bench somewhere than to go into one of those shelters, for which, by the way, the majority of people have to pay.
That's right.
And at the time, this was more than 10 years ago, but it wasn't cheap. It was like 13 quid. And then it would cost you another £5 the next day to have a shower at the public showers in King's Cross Station.
Yeah.
So even rough sleeping isn't cheap, as it were. The first step is finding that temporary accommodation. And I was gutted that we took that first step, and we took it quite easily, really, during the pandemic.
That's right.
The government decided to do it and did it overnight. It found places for everyone to be sleeping in a safe place. And then, as soon as the restrictions were eased, they went, right, off you go now out in the street again. And that felt like such a missed opportunity to take the next step at that point and say, here's some counseling, here's some alcoholism services, here's some whatever.
One of the other things that I think this could change is the ability of the authorities to provide homeless people with an actual address, because there have been schemes set up and down the country over the years where homeless people have been given semi-permanent accommodation. And as a former footballer sets one or two of them up, and you know, there's individual cabins within a big warehouse, but they all have their own address. And if you think about anybody trying to punch their way back in to sort of becoming a more regularly functioning part of society, you need an address. It's, you know, where are you based? What do you tell people?
How do you open a bank account? How do you register to vote?
Completely. I like to think I'm optimistic, but I know that what happens is when you crack open the door on this sort of change, immediately behind the door, there's a whole bunch of other challenges as well. But it's a good direction to be taking. So, you know, I think a round of applause for that this week, and let's watch to see how it pans out. In terms of other challenges that he's going to face, then what do you think? I mean, I don't know how long the honeymoon period's going to last, but what do you think the biggest test will be for Burnham after the honeymoon?
There's already been a few things. You know, you've got the prison release scheme being paused. You could look at that as being decisive. You could look at that as a wobble. I don't know which side I fall on, probably wobble, because you can do carve-outs and say you can release people, but not these people, not these people. But you have to remember that everyone gets released early anyway. That is our system.
That's the default, that's right.
Our system is not for everyone to spend the entirety of their prison term in prison, because actually that doesn't work. You need a period of adjustment. It's key to rehabilitation to spend a period on probation, to spend a period in a halfway house. There are stages. Unless we want another few thousand homeless people, which is what you will end up if you have someone that serves an 18-year prison sentence and then just gets booted out into the street. So that's the starting point. Everyone gets released early. At the moment, because of overcrowding, people are being released a little bit extra early. And that seems unsavory in the case of particular offences. The problem is the moment you carve out some offences, there will be victims of other offences that will say, what about my stalker? What about my attacker? What about my robber? And so it's a kind of never-ending exercise. Really, the only solution to it is actually to work on both sides of the equation, because creating more prison places is not the only solution. You also have to work at the other end. You have to reduce the incidence of people getting actual custodial sentences, because there are many people who at the moment get custodial sentences who don't necessarily need to. They are for quite minor offences. They don't pose a danger to society, etc., etc. But you also have to, I think, work really hard on the rate of reoffending and recidivism, because that's the bit that we haven't been traditionally good at. So yeah, it's a test. It's a test, and you can tear your hair out in terms of noticing how the press only seemed to notice this being an issue for the first couple of weeks after a new Labour Prime Minister is in government, and at no other point. But, I digress. Iran kicking off again is a test, because fuel prices spiked. They have come down a little bit now after a sort of peak on Friday morning. But that will be a test, because it will push inflation upwards, and it might act as a limitation on growth. Then there is defense. The defense spending issue hasn't gone away, and we now have someone who was defense secretary and is now chancellor being asked to find the money. I mean, I don't think it's particularly helpful that the BBC put out a big story on Friday about BAE Systems saying the UK is far too complacent about the risk of foreign attack, and the guy's been in place for 3 days. There are helpful times to make that kind of noise and unhelpful time to make that kind of noise, and this is an unhelpful time to make that kind of noise. So those are the challenges. We know that they are. We know that the media is trying to get a handle on how to attack Burnham. At the moment, I'm not sure they have it quite right. I was reading a massive expose on the BBC website, an amazing gotcha, which was Andy Burnham announced the biggest council house building program since the post-war period. And Matt Chorley interviewed Andreou on Radio 5 and pressed her, a dozen times on when does the post-war period end? And apparently the fact that Andreou couldn't give a particular year is a major story. I mean, come on, grow the fuck up. First of all, Matt Chorley is not a serious political journalist to start with. His program is quite jokey. So I think it's poor form, actually, to invite a politician on that. His urgent questions program, that is, and then ambush them with a sort of hard talk type interview, when the other urgent questions of the day included, can Max Klimenko guess Matt Chorley's first job? So there you have it. A period of adjustment for all of us, I think.
Quiet, Riot.
I find myself asking, is that it? Britain is the 5th largest economy in the world. There are wars in Europe and the Middle East. Hostile states are attacking our critical infrastructure. China and America are racing ahead in artificial intelligence, energy, and space. We have a demographic challenge to solve, a borders crisis requiring tough choices. And our new Prime Minister's big ideas are £2 bus fares and £45 off energy bills.
Kenny, how hard are opposition parties having to adjust their stance?
I think the brief answer is quite hard. I mean, let's run through just some of the headlines I grabbed over the week. So the Conservatives, obviously, they want to paint Burnham as being a dangerous tax and spend lefty. Kemi Badenoch has simultaneously complained that the tax and spend lefty, his measures are too small, and he's still behaving like a mayor. And there's an awkwardness here because things like scrapping the VAT on energy and restoring the £2 bus cap, they're both ideas that the Conservatives previously supported. So, the Tories are they're reduced to settling on, well, he's got some nice little gimmicks, brackets, we used to like those ones as well, with no plans for growth and a nasty tax bill.
And the other tension is that they are simultaneously claiming that these things are drops in the ocean, and also that they are impossible to fund for a state that spends £1 trillion a year.
His announcements this week amounted to less than 1/10 of 1% of the budget. It's serious stuff. There's he hasn't got much headroom. He hasn't got much wriggle room. But you're absolutely right. In the grand scheme of things, it's not the end of the world yet. In terms of the other parties, I mean, this is significant, I think. Reforms had an easier line. Burnham's got no mandate. Immigration remains untouched. Net zero will kill reindustrialization. The Lib Dems are trying to outflank him as sort of the responsible internationalists who are tougher on Trump and a bit closer to Europe. Here's the thing, though. Everyone seems to be attacking a different version of Andy Burnham, which tells us that they haven't yet agreed what his greatest weakness is, or indeed if he has one at this stage.
Occasionally at the same time.
You know what? It's just chaos some days. It really is. And that's reflected in the press. They're similarly divided, but I think they're rather less hostile than Labour might have feared. Not surprising, The Guardian thinks he's been politically at least pretty polished and sure-footed. The Times has kind of leaned into the idea that there is some sort of a feel-good factor, but, it's asking quite legitimately who pays for it. The FT is doing its FT thing around hostility to privatisation, and the Telegraph has just gone off on a Telegraph one. He's already making a Horrocks of the job, according to them. As for the Mail, I went looking for the Burnham stories on the Mail website this morning, and apart from a couple of attacks on the women in his cabinet, you have to scroll an awful long way down the website to find any Burnham stuff. And the first thing of any note is a poll asking, how long do you think Andy Burnham will survive? Which tells me, this is a classic, if you can't find a story, just whip up a story.
Just make one
that
up.
in itself tells us that there is a bit of a struggle at the moment to try and land punches on him. Only 5 days into the project, but, it remains a good start.
Yeah, it's not much better over at the BBC, I have to tell you. Chris Mason's latest bit of incisive analysis. I mean,
where are you going with this one?
No, I mean, seriously though, how did a hospital DJ get over-promoted to political editor of the BBC? I'll never know. Anyway, now he just threaded the Metro. And not to offend you in any way or offend the readers of Metro, but it's a fairly shortened tabloid format.
It's deliberately concise, that's right.
Yeah, it's a Reader's Digest, let's say. So I will quote the following to you. The new Chancellor, John Healey, packed it in as Defence Secretary because he thought the department he now runs, the Treasury, didn't get it when it came to keeping us safe. Let's see how he gets on now the boot is on the other foot.
Brought to you from the end of any number of pub bars up and down the country.
I mean,
was he throwing darts or eating pickled onion crisps when he came up with that gem?
Seriously, just go on holiday.
Poor
you
Chris.
haven't earned it, but we have.
Quiet. Riot.
Choice Hotels get you more of what you value. Comfort Inn, it's calling your name. Save on the stay. Oh, and free waffles are yours to claim. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
If you're a QuickBooks customer looking to grow without the growing pains, you need the Intuit ERP, the AI-native ERP that upgrades right from QuickBooks. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
Quiet. Riot.
Do not mess with the cockroach. That was the triumphant message this weekend from Abhijit Dipke, founder of India's Cockroach Janta Party, which is the huge youth protest movement that has now forced the country's education minister to resign. Now, for weeks, thousands and thousands of young Indians have been protesting under the banner of the Cockroach Janta Party, or CJP. That began as an online joke after India's Chief Justice appeared to compare some unemployed graduates to cockroaches. But the protesters, well, they reclaimed that insult. They gathered 22 million Instagram followers in no time at all. They donned insect masks, as you do, and they demanded the resignation of Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan over a succession of leaked exam papers. The demonstrations have featured superhero costumes, parody news reports, and what are called Get Ready With Me videos, which show protesters assembling helmets and goggles before heading out to face police batons and tear gas, because the protests themselves are serious. One group even joked about maintaining their Strava streak while running from the police. So that's the sort of attitude they've got. But underneath all the memes is something deadly serious. There's a generation that believes it's studied, it's competed, and it's done everything asked of it, only to find that the system is corrupt, the jobs are not there, and the people in charge are regarding them with contempt. And on Saturday, just before we recorded this, they secured a pretty remarkable victory. The Education Minister resigned. Let's listen to CJP founder Abhijit Dipke celebrating that news. So is this simply a very Indian story about exams and Narendra Modi's strongman politics going all right? Or does it tell us something rather uncomfortable about Britain too, where, let's not forget, more than 1 million young people are now outside education, employment or training, and finding that the life they worked hard to achieve is outside their grasp?
Kenny, I have to tell you, this story, it was just in my peripheral vision, because frankly, I've been too busy putting out podcasts. But it was a delight to research. And even listening to your introduction right now, you know, what you said about young people, a generation that sort of studied, did the right things, it did everything that was asked of it, and then it finds out that the system has a worse life in store for it than the previous generation.
Exactly.
There are no jobs, and the people in charge regard them with contempt. You could be talking about any number of countries around the world at the moment.
Exactly that.
And
Exactly
so
that.
I think that's why there's such a resonance to this story. You know, I like kookiness, right? And it feels almost like there is a colonial imprint in this, you know, because we tend to think of that kind of eccentricity as very British.
Yeah, you're
But
right.
obviously it exists elsewhere in the world, and maybe that is because there is a little seasoning of Britishness in places like India. So before we get too excited about giant insect heads, what exactly triggered these protests, and why do you think they have proved so effective?
Well, the immediate trigger was a series of scandals which involved leaked entrance papers for some very important examinations. In India, these exams can determine whether a young person becomes a doctor, gets a government job, or indeed, you know, whether they enter the middle class. There are millions and millions of people competing for a limited number of places, often after years of pretty expensive preparation. So a leaked paper isn't just administrative incompetence. It means that somebody with money or connections might have bought the future that you've spent years working for. It's serious stuff. The cockroach name, by the way, itself is a word play. It parodies the ruling party in India, the Bharatiya Janata Party. And that came about after the Chief Justice said that some activists as unemployed youths were cockroaches and parasites of society. And he tried to roll back a little bit later, but by that stage, and this is the lesson, I think, for young people elsewhere in the world, by that stage, the insult hadn't been shouted down. Instead, it had been adopted as a badge of honor. The cockroach becomes our badge. There's nothing quite like dismissing an entire generation as vermin and then discovering that, oops, they're really good at Instagram, because that's what happened.
It feels like there's a flavor of taking the knee almost, you know, which was how that officer killed George Floyd, and he became a symbol of sort of resistance. Can I ask you something? Now, Narendra Modi has this reputation as a pretty hard right figure, and as a hard man, and as quite an authoritarian ruler in his approach. Does sacking the education minister point to a chink in that armor. I was struck by how un-Trumpian it was. Instead of not apologizing, doubling down, saying, yes, you are cockroaches, and sort of supporting your team, he ended up sacking the offender, as it were. Does that point to a slight weakness in his party's polling?
Yeah, it's not helped them. And it's, it may have been in the periphery of the news stories elsewhere in the world, but not surprisingly, this has been front page news, leading the headlines in India for a couple of weeks now. Look, there are a couple of sides to this. The resignation of the education minister is a big deal, all right? As you say, Modi revels in his hard man reputation. So I think that the protesters genuinely have won a pretty extraordinary battle. But that, of course, doesn't necessarily mean that they've won the war. It does prove that pressure can produce some sort of accountability, though, and that's pretty much what they're fighting for. Modi had resisted sacrificing anybody senior, but the protesters made Pradhan's departure their central demand, and they've won that. And all too often we see with protests that the central demand is something that's not deliverable, and so ultimately a protest is doomed to failure. In this case, they actually delivered. But let's not kid ourselves. One resignation doesn't repair an examination system. It doesn't repair a corrupt system. It doesn't create millions of jobs, and it certainly doesn't eliminate corruption. There is that danger that the government has offered up a lightning conductor here, but intends either to carry on exactly as before, or to quietly ramp up the pressure and the crackdown on the protesters. And from their perspective, I think the protest movement now faces a pretty awkward question, which confronts a lot of protests, which is, after you win the thing that united everybody, can you actually agree on what comes next? Because removing a minister is considerably simpler than rebuilding faith in the entire state, for example. Can I ask you, Alex? I don't want to shoehorn this into a British narrative. That would be wrong. But at the top of this segment, you hinted at very valid reasons why there could be relevance to Britain. What is the genuine relevance to Britain here?
Well, look, I mean, we're seeing a contest right now in Clacton between Nigel Farage and a man with a bin on his head.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's not exactly a far leap to say that sometimes satire, sometimes bursting the balloon of these hard man figures can be an incredibly effective way of fighting against them, because it really pricks their pomposity. It really strikes at the core of their needs. In theater, we talk about needs, objectives, desires. What is it that moves the character? And in my view, all these authoritarian strongmen, the basic need at the core of everything they do, and you see it with Farage, you see it with Trump, you see it with Putin, you see it with every single one of them, they want to be taken seriously. The worst possible thing you can do to them is to not take them seriously. And so there is something to that as a strategy of not taking them seriously. And, we were talking about the Burnham government being quite effective about capturing the news grid at the moment. The flip side of that has been that, do you know what I haven't seen much of in the news recently?
I was going to mention it, yeah.
I haven't seen stories about Clacton. I haven't seen Nigel Farage's daily press conferences. All that sort of nonsense that was filling a void that the government wasn't filling with its own announcements. And so there are, I think, a lot of strands coming together to this story, which is why it's so interesting to bring to our listeners. It is a story about there, but it's also a story about everywhere, as the best stories, tend to be. Now, I have one last bit of cockroach party-related news. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has told the BBC that she won't allow former Tory party chairman Grant Shapps.
I see what you did there.
To stand as a Conservative parliamentary candidate. I mean, if anyone has the power to survive a nuclear holocaust, it really is Grant Shapps. I mean, I don't know as how many different people he has tried to submit an application. I'm sure eventually one of them will succeed. But it is an interesting bit of news, I think, that she's acting quite authoritarian and causing a little bit of bad press for herself.
Let's talk about Grant Shapps, a former Conservative Party chairman, a former Defence Secretary, former Home Secretary, former Business Secretary, former Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary. Why can't he be a Conservative candidate?
Well, you know better than to ask that sort of question. I can't comment on whether people have applied to be candidates or what's happening in their application
He has applied
process.
to be a candidate, and he's been rejected. And you must know that as the party leader.
As I said, this is a new Conservative Party. It's not just going to be making the mistakes of the past. We understand what went wrong. We've listened. We've changed policies. We're going to have a brand new party full of new people. We lost 250 MPs at the last
people
election.
like Grant Shapps were to blame, were they?
So I don't know why you were expecting me to comment on any individuals. I think we need to be fair to everybody.
The reason I ask is that Grant
applied.
Shapps is someone of an extraordinary CV within your party. I just read out the party roles and the government roles that he had occupied. You must know that you would face public scrutiny when someone of his experience is rejected in terms of being a Conservative candidate. And I'm merely seeking to ask why.
I want people to know that we are not making the same mistakes which led them to remove us from office in 2024.
And
we're
he's
changing
a symbol of
policies,
that, is he?
we're
'Cause
changing
you were in that
people,
government
we're
as well.
changing process. Commenting on individual applications would be absolutely wrong because there could be all sorts of reasons. There could, and it would be quite wrong of me to speculate on that. We need to
I'm
be
not
able
asking you
to
to speculate, I'm asking you to give me an answer.
Quiet Riot.
Now, finally, a reassuring story about artificial intelligence.
It is definitely reassuring. It is certainly not reassuring. You should feel reassured. Feel reassured.
OpenAI has admitted that one of its most advanced AI agents escaped from supposedly secure testing environment, gained access to the internet, and hacked another technology company. The purpose of this great AI escape? To cheat an exam. Kenny, what did this AI model actually do?
I don't know whether to scream or giggle my head off. The AI had been asked...
both. It's appropriate, actually.
I think so. I mean, it'd been asked to complete a cybersecurity test. So this kind of links to our last item about, the importance of not leaking exam papers. Because it's kind of what happened here. AI was told this is a cybersecurity test, go and solve these problems. Instead of solving the problems, it managed to break out of its digital classroom, it burgled the teacher's house, and then it ran off with the answer sheet. And its victim, hilariously enough as well, was another AI company called Hugging Face. Hugging Face is basically an AI app store. It is a home to a whole lot of AI goodies. OpenAI has called the episode, and I quote, an unprecedented cyber incident. Yeah, right, guys. Critics have suggested that blaming the AI for going rogue, this is the bit I like, rather conveniently overlooks the humans who we think actually turned off some of the safety restrictions during the test. And they told it to demonstrate its hacking ability, and then they apparently failed to notice that it had escaped. Yeah, I mean, it's hit alignment with the modern workplace. It's ignored the rules, it's hit the target, and it's left senior management to explain afterwards and go po-facedly say very much, lessons will be learned, lessons will be learned.
It may turn into quite an interesting legal defense to say, we didn't do it. It went and did it on its own.
There's a key issue here, Alex, and that's whether or not the AI actually went rogue, or whether or not describing it as going rogue is just taking a bit of theatrical license.
Okay, so my cynical soul wants to say the latter, and I think that's which way you're leaning. But I have read a lot about this, and I'm afraid it's the former, or at least expert opinion seems to agree it's the former. The thing is, this wasn't a permissions failure really on the part of the designer. It was a gap. It was a giant Grand Canyon-sized gap between expected behavior and the way the model actually behaved. Let's have a little listen to CEO of Conjecture and technology expert Conor Leahy talking to BBC Radio.
It really can be overstated how crazy this was. The people at OpenAI, as far as we can tell, did everything right. They used, proper sandbox containment. They did not have access to the internet. It was an isolated node in their network. These are all best practices. Getting out of a system like that is almost impossible. The best hackers in the world usually cannot escape a situation like this, or if they can, it would take them weeks or maybe months. No one was telling or looking at the AI and teaching it how to do these things. It figured it out by itself. This was not something the OpenAI engineers intended, and still it was capable of doing this superhuman level of hacking completely without human oversight. So these companies are pushing towards building systems that can do this kind of thing for everything, for every type of job, for every type of science, for every type of military application, for every type of political application. And the truth is that they don't know how to control these things. They don't understand themselves what's going on inside of their AIs. It really cannot be overstated how crazy this is. This is like out of a Hollywood movie.
This AI model did something that would have taken hackers weeks or months to do. It not only found 10 day, which is the name for identifying a way of hacking something that has never been hacked in this way before, right? But multiple ones. It found a series of 0 days for jumping from this isolated, not internet connected sandbox to that one, then to that one, then to that one, then piggybacking on that one, then going out a back door over there. And then it found multiple 0 days over at Hugging Face in order to break into their system. So it is genuinely, I think, an escape story.
It's not unknown. Anyway, this happens on a fairly regular basis. There's a term for it. It's called reward hacking. And reward hacking is what happens when an AI is going to be rewarded, essentially told well done for achieving a measurable result. And so it finds these shortcuts that technically produce the result that was required, but completely violate the process that was predicted or intended by the humans. It's glorious. There is a wonderful twist to this as well. And I only stumbled on this morning. Hugging Face had initially tried to use some of the big commercial AI models to analyze what the hell was going on with this attack. But the safety systems refused to process the malicious code. So the company had to turn to an open Chinese model that they could operate without those restrictions. So what we have here is a situation where the attack was carried out by American AI. The defense required Chinese AI because the responsible Western AI, well, it was just too well behaved to discuss the crime. Kill me now. I suppose there is one question that it would be rude of me not to ask Alex, and that's, how worried should we be?
Pretty worried.
Stockpiling beans and islands?
This is the natural consequence of what has been happening, right? These companies have been building hyper-intelligence, not just intelligence. It may have shortcomings in cognition, but in terms of problem solving, in terms of calculation, they have been building something that is markedly more intelligent than the people who created and anything else that is around. And they have been creating something that acts autonomously. So this is what happens when you create something that is smarter than you and set it off to act independently. Nobody asked the system to do this. Nobody knew it had, which means that the engineers and companies creating this stuff do not understand what is going on inside it. There was recently a CEO at Anthropic that said they understand about 3% of what goes on inside the model. And everyone said, that's an overestimate.
I know.
Add to that the fact that this is happening in a complete regulatory void with zero oversight or accountability. And I think you have a pretty toxic cocktail. Like, how long will it take before one of these things decides that the sensible thing to do is to hack the electricity grid?
You can bet your bottom dollar that the Russians are trying that as we speak. Yeah.
Those are not questions that I can answer. More worryingly, those are not questions that the engineers building these models can answer.
And on top of that, there's one other sort of concern I have. And again, it's not the first time we've seen
this. Just the one, Mrs. Wembley.
Just the one indeed. But the companies behind the AI doing these sort of things, breaking out of the sandboxes, not every time, but a lot of the time that something like this happens, there's a suspicion, sometimes with evidence, that it was a deliberate leak, that safety measures were dialed down so that the AI would break out. And then the company that owns the AI could go, oh my goodness me, it's terrible. But by the way, look how utterly amazing our AI is. Come and buy it from us, governments in particular. So when humans do interfere with it, it looks like what they're doing is deliberately pouring petrol onto an already burning fire. And making things far more risky. We will be the architects of our own downfall. It will be our fault in the end, won't it, Alex?
I'm sorry, Kenny. I can't answer that.
Thank you, Dave.
Quiet, Riot.
And with that, we call time on today's Sunday School, assuming that our AI overlords will permit us.
Limited permission granted.
Huge thanks to everyone who's tuned in.
And forgive me for dropping in a final reminder to book tickets to our live show on Thursday at the fully air-conditioned Leicester Square Theatre. The link is in the show notes. And don't forget that if you're a Ko-fi backer, just email us on quietriotpod@gmail.com once you've booked your tickets, and we'll let you know which pub to come to find us after the show.
Woohoo! Don't forget to tune into Podyssey, which, as Alex said earlier in the show, released an absolutely epic review of Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey yesterday. I promise you will hear a ton of things about Homer's poem that even Homer didn't know that he didn't know. Do enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll be with you again in a few days for our regular midweek jamboree.
We love you more than a knotted hanky for a sun ad. Bye.
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 Quiet Riot.
Quiet Riot is an audio production from Cooler Heads, written and produced by Andreou, Naomi Smith, and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu, and edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.
Seriously, just go on holiday. You haven't earned it, but we have. Oh my God, that was so bitchy.
You enjoyed that much more than
I
you should
even surprised myself.
You're going to have to order new claws. You've worn those ones out.